Imagine the British Empire at the peak of its power in 1845. They were about to launch the most technologically advanced, most expensive expedition in human history. Two massive warships, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, are ready to set sail. On board are 129 of the Royal Navy's finest men, handpicked for a legendary quest to conquer the final unmapped frontier on Earth, the fabled Northwest Passage through the Arctic. These weren't just ships. They were floating fortresses of technology. They had reinforced iron hulls to smash through ice, powerful steam engines to propel them when the wind died, and central heating to keep the crew warm. They carried libraries filled with thousands of books, a grand piano, and enough canned food to last for 3 years. In their minds, they were invincible. But what they didn't know, what no one could have known, was that they were sailing directly into a frozen trap, a white labyrinth that would never let them go. Not a single one of those 129 men would ever see England again. Their journey began with confidence. They sailed across the Atlantic, making their last stop in Greenland, before disappearing into the icy maze of the Canadian Arctic. The first winter was expected. It was just part of the plan. They anchored their ships off Beechy Island, built a small encampment, and settled in to wait for the summer thaw. They held theatrical plays, read books, and maintained their military discipline, confident that when the sun returned, the ice would break, and they would continue their historic voyage. 3 men died that first winter, but that was considered normal for an Arctic expedition. They were given proper burials, their graves marked with headstones that still stand today. But then, summer arrived. Or rather, it didn't. The sun returned, hanging in the sky for 24 hours a day, but the temperature barely rose above freezing. The sea remained a solid, unmoving sheet of white. The ships, which were supposed to be smashing through ice, were now trapped in its unyielding grip. The second summer came and went, with no change. The Erebus and the Terror were caught in a vice of multi-year pack ice, drifting helplessly south with the frozen ocean current. They were prisoners in a kingdom of ice. Inside the ships, things were getting strange. The steam engines provided warmth, but the endless darkness of the second polar winter began to weigh on the crew's minds. The constant groaning and cracking of the ice around the hull was a terrifying, ever-present soundtrack. But the real enemy wasn't outside, it was inside. It was hidden in their food. To feed 129 men for 3 years, the expedition brought an astonishing 8,000 tins of canned food. This was revolutionary technology for the 1840s, a way to preserve food for years. But the contract to supply these cans was awarded at the last minute and rushed. The manufacturer, a man named Stephen Goldner, used a sloppy and cheap method to seal the tins. He used lead solder, and in the rush, a lot of it dripped right into the soup, the meat, and the vegetables. Every single day, with every meal, the crew of the Franklin expedition was slowly, unknowingly, poisoning themselves. Lead poisoning is a horrific, insidious process. It doesn't just damage the body, causing weakness and pain. It attacks the mind. The men began to suffer from paranoia, memory loss, and terrifying hallucinations. The strict discipline of the Royal Navy started to fracture. Imagine being trapped in the dark, surrounded by ice, and you can't even trust your own thoughts. Your friends and shipmates are acting erratically, whispering in corners, seeing things that aren't there. The command structure, the very thing that was supposed to keep them alive, was crumbling from within. By April 1848, after 2 years trapped in the ice, their commander, Sir John Franklin, was dead. The remaining 105 men, led by Captain Francis Crozier, made a final, desperate decision. They would abandon the ships. Looking at a map, they saw a river hundreds of miles to the south. They believed if they could just walk there, they could follow it to a Hudson's Bay Company trading post and find rescue. It was a death march into the unknown. In their lead-poisoned confusion, they made a fatal error. They packed their heavy lifeboats with completely useless items. They dragged sledges loaded with silver cutlery, polished officers' buttons, silk handkerchiefs, and heavy books. They were literally dragging their own coffins across the ice, filled with the symbols of a civilization that couldn't save them. They left behind the essential survival gear that might have given them a chance. The journey was a nightmare. They were weak from starvation and sickness. Their minds were broken. The landscape was a featureless, brutal expanse of snow and jagged ice. As the weeks turned into a month, their food ran out completely. The cold was a constant, gnawing predator. And in their final, desperate hours, the men crossed a line from which there is no return. For decades, the fate of the Franklin expedition was a complete mystery. Search parties found clues, but no survivors. They found chilling stories from the local Inuit people, who spoke of seeing a group of starving white men who fell down and died as they walked. The Inuit also told stories that were so disturbing, Victorian society refused to believe them. They spoke of finding boots containing cooked human flesh and campsites with splintered human bones stripped of their meat. It wasn't until the 1980s and 90s when modern archaeologists found the remains of the crew on King William Island that the full horror was confirmed. Forensic analysis of the bones showed unmistakable cut marks and signs of breakage consistent with cannibalism. In their last moments, the pride of the British Navy, the best-equipped expedition in history, had been reduced to eating their own dead to survive just one more day. For over 170 years, the final resting place of the two ships, the Erebus and the Terror, remained one of the greatest maritime mysteries of all time. They became the subject of folk songs, ghost stories, and legends. Dozens of search missions failed to find them. Then, in an incredible turn of events, the mystery was solved. In 2014, a Canadian search team, using a combination of modern sonar and ancient Inuit oral history, found the wreck of the HMS Erebus. It was sitting upright on the seabed, almost perfectly preserved in the freezing water. Then, 2 years later, in 2016, the HMS Terror was found in another bay, even more perfectly preserved. It looked like it could set sail tomorrow. The tables and chairs were still in place, and plates were still stacked in their racks. The locations of the ships revealed one last, haunting twist to the story. They were found many miles south of where the crew had abandoned them. This suggests a chilling possibility. Perhaps after the death march failed, a few desperate, starving survivors managed to struggle back to the ships. Maybe they tried one last time to break free from the ice, to restart the steam engines, hoping for a miracle that would never come. We can only imagine their final moments aboard their silent, frozen tomb. Today, the Northwest Passage that defeated Franklin is now regularly open in the summer, a direct result of our changing climate. The ice that held the Erebus and Terror for so long is melting away. But the story of the Franklin expedition remains frozen in time. It's a powerful, humbling reminder that no matter how advanced our technology, no matter how strong our belief in our own invincibility, we are always at the mercy of the natural world. Nature always has the final say. So, what do you think? If you were in their boots, facing that impossible choice, what would you have done? Would you have stayed with the relative safety of the ships, hoping for a thaw? Or would you have taken your chances and walked into that vast, white unknown? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, And if you enjoy stories from the depths of history, be sure to subscribe for more.